Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. It took me a lot longer than I thought it would to get this video ready, between stopping to do E3 content and the fact that Pokemon Gold is like a game and a half in length. So I'm sorry about that, but it's finally time for my review of Pokemon Gold and Silver. So let's get into it. Let's start with a little bit of context. Pokemon Gold and Silver launched in the States in October of 2000, about 2 years after Red and Blue did. This was the exact same year that such games as Metal Gear Solid, Majora's Mask, Final Fantasy IX, and The Sims launched. It was also the same year that the PlayStation 2 was released in Japan, and that DeviantArt was unleashed upon the internet, meaning that even the most depraved Pokemon fan was ready to be catered to. Now, when I was a kid, I only had Pokemon Gold. My sister Emily, she ended up getting Silver, and sometime later my eldest sister Chelsea got Pokemon Crystal, which at the time I don't think any of us realized how much of a big deal it was that that was the first Pokemon game that let you play as a female protagonist. But eventually all three of those cartridges ended up becoming mine when my sister sort of stopped caring. But this is one of the first and only games that all three of us played together, and it made it that much cooler that my older siblings also enjoyed playing this thing with me, you know? And we don't really play games together anymore, so I do still hold this game in sort of a special place, because not only did we all play it together, but it's actually also the first Pokemon game that I managed to beat. But I'm not the only person who loved this game. Pokemania was in full effect at the time that this game launched. You know, there's a reason why every single person my age can sing the Pokemon theme song from memory. Why marching bands would march to Pokemon. You know, when the Pokemon movies released in theaters, everyone dropped what they were doing and went to go see them. People are still to this day sad about Butterfree, you know? Pokemon at this time was something really special. But it wasn't just the time period in which this game came out that made it special. There were also a ton of quality of life improvements that really stepped it up from the previous games. You know, things like adding color made the world feel more real. Having better sprites that actually looked like the Pokemon from the anime, so you didn't have to, like, look up what that Pokemon was. Better attack animations, just having experience bars visible on the screen without having to go into your Pokemon's stats screen, fixing a lot of the combat issues like bind or sleep, the fact that you can just use your HMs by walking up to the item that you want to use your HM on, and again not have to pause the game and go into the individual Pokemon to use it. Being able to see what TMs are in your bag without having to boot each one up individually. You know, separating each of your object categories into different pockets in your bag so that you didn't have to cycle through absolutely every item that you had to find the one you were looking for. Just a ton of quality of life improvements that make this game feel like how Red and Blue should have felt. Which is of course not to say that they fixed absolutely every problem that existed in Pokemon Red and Blue. Like, there's still a limited inventory. You're gonna run into that limit a lot less because the bag is split into different categories, but you'll still hit it a couple of times throughout your playthrough. Or the fact that grinding is just so much worse in Gold and Silver than it ever was in Red and Blue, which I won't get into here because I have a lot to say about it later. But the HMs, the new HMs that they added, are completely pointless. Like, Waterfall only exists because there's one cave with one waterfall in it that only exists to check whether or not you have Waterfall. Or like Whirlpool, which you only use when you're going to capture Lugia, which, yes, does make Lugia feel a little bit more special, but ends up just being a wasted move on one of your Pokemon that's completely useless other than that one scenario. Or like, some of the gym battles are really irritating, like Morty, who will just put you to sleep and use Dream Eater over and over again, which means that you're just waiting through this RNG nightmare to wake up so you can actually be allowed to play against him. or like Whitney's Miltank, which I feel like I don't have to get into because everyone already knows what a nightmare Whitney's Miltank is. But by far, the biggest problem with Pokemon Gold and Silver is the distribution of its Pokemon. One example of this is with its gym leaders. Half of the Johto gym leaders do not have Johto Pokemon. Faulkner, Bugsy, Morty, and Chuck all exclusively use Kanto Gen 1 Pokemon, despite the fact that there are Gen 2 Johto Pokemon of that same type as their gyms that have just for some reason not been given to those gym leaders. And to make matters worse, in the end game, the post game, when you go to Kanto, there are more Kanto gym leaders that have Johto Pokemon. Misty, Erica, Janine, Sabrina, and Blaine all have Johto Pokemon. Just to recap, there are more Gen 1 gym leaders with Gen 2 Pokemon than there are Gen 2 gym leaders with Gen 2 Pokemon, despite the fact that those Pokemon are supposedly from the Johto region of Gen 2. And I don't understand why that choice was made. And to explain the rest of the Pokemon problem in Gold and Silver, let me explain to you how I chose my team. Because some of my absolute favorite Pokemon of all time are from Johto. Pokemon like Tyranitar, Houndoom, Steelix, Scizor. But none of those Pokemon made it onto my team because of this terrible distribution of Pokemon. Let me break it down. There are 100 new Pokemon added in the second generation. Now, for the sake of choosing Pokemon for a team, we're really only looking at fully evolved Pokemon because I'm not going to use an unevolved Pokemon on my team, so immediately that already cuts the number down to 63. Then you pull out all the version exclusives that I can't get because I'm playing Gold and not Silver, and you take out all of the legendaries because my friend Steven, who one time almost ate this entire burger, told me that if I use legendaries on my team, then I'm like a loser or something. Not exactly sure, but I took it to heart. And even if I did want to use legendaries on my team, I wouldn't probably be able to use the legendary dogs because they're almost impossible to catch and to spawn randomly. And I wouldn't be able to use Celebi because you can only get that legendary if you're a Japanese player who was able to get it during a very specific window of time in the year 2000. So none of those would be an option anyway. Then I chose Feraligatr as my starter, which by the way is spelled like this, which irritates me a lot more than it should, but there you have it. So obviously I couldn't get either of the other starters because you can only get one. Then you can also pull out a lot of the water type Pokemon because I already have a water type, so I don't need these other ones. Then, and this is the one that's possibly the most irritating, there are some Pokemon, Johto Pokemon, that you cannot catch in Johto. There are a handful of them that you either have to catch in Kanto, despite them being Johto Pokemon, and even some of the biggest ones, like Tyranitar, can only be caught at Mount Silver, which you have to have not only all 8 Johto gym badges, but also all 8 Kanto gym badges to even get to, meaning that you're basically never going to use a Tyranitar in the playthrough of Gold and Silver. And on top of that, even some of the Pokemon that you can catch in Johto, you can't catch until about the 8th gym badge, by which point you've probably already chosen your team. So you can just remove all of those from the running of Pokemon that you're going to choose as well. Then we can take out all of the trade evolutions, because I'm playing this game in 2021 and nobody else is, so I can't trade my Pokemon, so those options are all completely gone. And even if I could, a lot of those trade items are really hard to get, like Metal Coat, which you can only get either in the end game of over in Kanto, or you have to catch Magnemite and hope that you can pull one off of it at a 5% chance of them having it. So that wasn't gonna happen. And Gold and Silver also adds this really fun mechanic where certain Pokemon just flee during battle. Some of them have like a 50% chance of fleeing on any given turn, some have a 10% chance of fleeing on any given turn, meaning that it's going to be really difficult to knock them down to a low health and catch them in a time period before they run away. And some other Pokemon have an extremely low spawn rate of like 1 to 5%, meaning that they're super hard to find. And some of those Pokemon with the low spawn rate also flee, so you can take away all of those Pokemon, and that leaves us with this, which is not a lot, and genuinely about half of those Pokemon are abjectly terrible, so you can remove those as well, which means that at the end of the day, when I was choosing my remaining 5 Pokemon, I had 13 choices. That's a really big problem when you're talking about the Pokemon that you're going to be able to use on your team for a playthrough. And that's why I ended up with the team of Feraligatr, Furret, Noctowl, Ampharos, Forretress, and Sudowoodo. Did I end up loving my team by the end of the game? Yes, except for Forretress, who was only useful once. But it was just not the team that I wanted to use. And yeah, I could have used Gen 1 Pokemon, but I had just played Red and Blue, and I didn't really want to reuse the Kanto Pokemon. So these were the only choices that I had, and I didn't like most of them. But let's get on a more positive note, because I do actually really like this game. And I think one of the major reasons why I do is because it feels a lot more real than Red and Blue did. And yes, obviously you could put the word real in like 3 or 4 quotations, but you know what I mean. I mentioned this earlier when I was talking about how they added color to it and how that made it feel a lot more vibrant. But it's not just that. It's also how all of the towns feel so much more distinct. Like you've got Goldenrod City, which is this actual large city with like a shopping center and the game corner and the daycare, and it's this whole proper city. But then, you know, you go to a place like Ecruteak and it's this smaller town with these 2 massive towers, the one that was burned down and the one where you eventually end up catching Ho-Oh. You go to Olivine Port and it's this great like coastal city with this massive lighthouse. Or you go to Blackthorn and it's all the way up in the mountains, and every single one of the towns feels a lot different than the previous ones. You know what I mean? And that adds a lot. Having the day and night cycle also does that, where you catch different Pokemon at different times of the day. There are some Pokemon that are nocturnal and only come out at night. You know, the fact that there's little events like the bug catching contest that only happens on, I think it's like Tuesday and Thursday, but it's this fun little event that if you happen to be playing on that day, you can go and participate in. The fact that the legendary Pokemon are actually part of the world and not just in it, because like in Red and Blue, when you run across like Moltres or Articuno, you almost do it on accident because they're just kind of in the path that you have to go through to get to the next gym. Whereas in Gold and Silver, people actually talk about these Pokemon. There's actually a story for them. They have specific locations where they're supposed to be, with the exceptions of the dogs, of course. But they are actually part of the world. And the music is really, really good. It's honestly even better than Red and Blue was. And, for better or worse, there are people who you meet along the way who you can give your phone number to and they'll call you. And a lot of the times they don't have anything important to say. It's just like, caught a cool Rattata, won a battle, like whatever, completely nonsense stuff. But it makes it feel like the people that you meet are actually of some amount of consequence. And that makes the world feel a lot better, more vibrant than in Red and Blue. And also, unlike Red and Blue, Gold and Silver actually has a story. It's extremely bare bones, but it exists, so, you know, baby steps. You don't just set out to do the gym challenge because you're 10 and that's what 10-year-olds do in the Pokemon world. No, you leave because your rival Silver steals a Pokemon from the Pokemon lab and you have to go find him, and you just are gonna do the gym challenge along the way. You know, when you get to Olivine City, you have to go and get medicine to heal a sick Pokemon. You know, there are reasons for you doing the things that you do, which in Red and Blue there just wasn't, you know? And there are characters who actually do things. It's crazy, I know, but like your rival, Silver, like I mentioned before, he's a better rival than Blue. And I know that that's going to get a lot of people upset that I said that, but he is. Blue is just this guy who's kind of a dick and doesn't really have any character growth or do anything other than show up and fight you. And yes, that is also true of Silver, but Silver actually does some bad things. He steals a Pokemon. He's, training his Pokemon just to be extremely powerful, and he's kind of cruel to them. But throughout the course of the game, people keep telling him, like, you have to be nicer to your Pokemon, and he actually changes throughout the course of the game until at the end, one of his Pokemon, a Golbat, evolves into a Crobat, which I know that doesn't sound like a big deal, but the only way to evolve Golbat to Crobat is through a type of evolution called friendship, which means that you and your Pokemon have to be really close friends, right? You have to do nice things like take it for walks and give it haircuts and give it nice treats. You know, you have to be nice to it. And the fact that he is able to get that evolution means that he has grown as a character, and it's extremely like blink and you miss it, but that's more character growth than we see in any character in Red and Blue and any other character in Gold and Silver, frankly. But it's something. It's a step in the right direction. Or Lance, he's the champion of the Elite Four in Gold and Silver, and he actually does things. You meet him at the Lake of Rage where he's fighting against Team Rocket to save this rare Gyarados, or he helps you again fight Team Rocket when they take over a radio tower. You know, he's actually an actor in the world who does things, and that's great. Hell, even one of the gym leaders, Jasmine, she has a role where you get to see that she's, a caring and compassionate person, because she won't battle you in her gym until you get the medicine to help her heal a sick Pokemon, Just little things like that make these characters feel like characters instead of just fights. And that's really important for the storytelling of this game. And yes, I wish that was true of the other gym leaders or the Elite Four members, and it's absolutely not. Like, hell, some of the Elite Four members, they haven't even managed to match the type of that trainer to the room that they're in. Like, Will is a psychic type gym leader, and he's in a room that's full of ice. Or Bruno is a fighting type gym leader, or Elite Four member, and he's in a room full of lava, which doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But, we're taking steps in the right direction. And somehow, weirdly, despite the fact that Team Rocket was beat in the first game canonically and doesn't have Giovanni to lead them, they actually act with more of a purpose in Gold and Silver than they do in Red and Blue. When they show up and they start taking Slowpoke tails, it's because they are trying to make money, and they're actually doing a villainous act. They're taking the tails off these Slowpoke that are owned by people, and you get to see the ramifications of those things. Unlike in Red and Blue, where the first time you run into them, they're like stealing fossils in Mount Moon, but like Mount Moon is just a cave in the middle of nowhere. So it's like, who are you even stealing things from? Are you villains or are you archaeologists? Like, what? Or, when they take over the radio tower in Goldenrod, it's so that they can try and reach Giovanni. Like, there's a reason for why they are doing the things that they're doing. And that's a big step in the right direction, and it just makes me really happy to see. But the last thing that I want to talk about is Kanto. And I kind of have mixed feelings about it, because it's really cool that once you beat the Elite Four of Johto, you're able to go back to Kanto and sort of explore the region from the first game. And I really wish that more games let you explore multiple regions, but in this game, it's just not very good. Like, barely anything happens there. There's not really a story in that area, And really all you're doing is seeing what's happened since Gen 1, you know? Like, Cinnabar Island, the volcano on it exploded and destroyed the town, or Viridian Forest has been completely cut down and no longer exists, and Mount Moon is, like, for some reason only 2 rooms, and Misty's got a boyfriend. But and those things are interesting, but I don't feel like they really add anything. So Kanto just ultimately ends up feeling kind of pointless, you know? Like, you go through all the gyms and you sort of just tear through them like they're nothing, because they're going to be a lot lower level than you were when you beat the Elite Four, which you had to do to get to Kanto, you know? And even when you beat those gyms, you can't look at your badges. The section where you look at your badges in the pause menu only shows you the Johto ones. So you can't even, like, if you take a couple of days off and you forget which ones you've beaten, you can't even look at it to see which ones you haven't finished. And they don't have a second Elite Four, because apparently Johto and Kanto share one, which in concept is interesting, but in execution is disappointing. And this is where the biggest problem with the grinding comes in, because you tear through 7 of the 8 gyms in Kanto, no problem, because they are lower level probably than you were when you beat the Elite Four, right? Plus you get to fight a bunch of trainers, so you're going to level up quite a bit just going through Kanto. But the 7th gym leader that you're going to fight in Kanto, Blaine, his Pokemon are between level 45 and 50, right? Completely doable, probably pretty close to what your Pokemon are at that point. But then the 8th gym leader, Blue, the rival from the first game, his Pokemon are level 54 to 58, which is a pretty big jump up. Not impossible, but a pretty big jump up. So you have to either grind roughly 10 levels or just fight him underleveled and be really good, which is interesting in theory, but again, not so great in execution, because combat is still not very good in Gold and Silver. But then once you beat Blue, the only fight left, the equivalent, I guess, of the Elite Four once you've beaten all 8 Kanto gym leaders, is that you get to fight against Red, the player character from the first generation of games. Which sounds really cool, but Blue's highest level Pokemon was 58, right? Red's lowest level Pokemon is 73, and his highest is 81. So it's an absolutely massive level jump, meaning that you either have to grind for multiple hours against Pokemon that are very underleveled compared to you and are going to give you bare minimum experience, or you have to fight him when you're about 20 levels below him, which is what I ended up doing. And this was the only fight in which my Forretress actually was worth having, because he can't do damage for anything, but he can take damage really well, and I was able to just lame this fight out by throwing healing items on my other Pokemon while Forretress took hits. And it was just a really boring and anticlimactic way to beat the game, but the only other way that I could have thought to do it is by grinding for multiple hours, and I just wasn't gonna do that. So ultimately, the addition to Kanto feels like, if anything, it's kind of a detraction from the core game, because it makes it so that multiple of the Pokemon that you would rather have on your team are impossible to get in Johto and are only able to get in Kanto. And then when you get to Kanto, it's just really underwhelming. So yeah, to make a long story short, Pokemon Gold and Silver is a massive step in the right direction as compared to Red and Blue in terms of quality of life and storytelling and world building, but because of a lackluster endgame and a terrible distribution of Pokemon, I would give it a 7 out of 10, because I'm going off the IGN grading scale, and they describe a 7 as time well spent. Could it be better? Absolutely. Maybe it lacks ambition, is too repetitive, has a few technical bumps in the road, or is too repetitive, but we came away from it happy nonetheless, and we think you will too. And that's exactly how I feel about this game. Is it a good time? Yes. Is it a great game? Does it break the mold? No. That's just the way I see it, though, and I'd love to hear how much you probably disagree with me in the comments below. And if you like this kind of content, please let me know by liking this video, sharing it with a friend, or best of all, subscribing to the channel. But anyway, I've rambled on for far too long, so until next time, I'll see you around.